Welcome in, everyone. I've been listening to this band all week, and I'm so excited to talk about them with you. They're called the Yachtles, and their debut album has been making waves.
The Yachtles, huh? Interesting name.
It is.
Yeah.
Just saying, it puts you in a good mood.
Yeah, and musically, they're like if Cheap Trick and the Cars got together.
Yeah. Had a baby.
But over in New Brighton in the UK instead of the US.
I know, right? Transatlantic New Wave.
The other wild thing is how much their sound is tied to a late 70s band, Yachts.
Oh, yeah. Yachts. A local legend.
And this is where it gets even more interesting because the founder of the Yachtles, Michael Kalik.
Guess what? He's the nephew of Bob Bellis, the drummer for Yachts.
Yeah, it's a tribute to him, maybe a reincarnation, maybe even a playful parody of his uncle's band.
Okay, so we've got a band with a retro vibe, with this transatlantic twist and a family connection that goes way back.
Sounds like we've got a lot to unpack here.
We do. Our mission today is to figure out if the Yachtles are just a nostalgia trip or if they're forging their own path.
We've got interviews, articles, even a few personal stories to help us figure it all out.
Perfect. Where should we start?
I think we got to start with the music. The album is called F.F.S, and it's packed with earworms. You know those tunes that get stuck in your head for days?
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
And the single 1977 is a perfect example of that.
Right. It's been stuck in my head all week.
What do you think about that choice, 1977? Why that year?
Well, 1977 was a huge year for punk and new wave. The Ramones, Talking Heads, The Damned, all those bands were blowing up. Maybe the Yachtles are tapping into that energy, that rebellious spirit, but making it their own.
I like that. And think about the context of the tribute, Bob Bellis, Kalik's uncle. He would have been right there in that scene with Yachts. So 1977 could be this really personal connection to his uncle.
Yeah, like a musical conversation across time. It's not just about copying a sound. It's about capturing a feeling, an era, and making it new again. Exactly.
It's not nostalgia. It's a fusion. It's taking those influences and bringing in a modern perspective. What about that album title, FFS? Any theories?
I don't know. The first thing I think of is Full Fathom 5 from The Tempest.
Oh, yeah, Shakespeare.
Very nautical, very fitting for the whole vibe.
Yeah, I can see that.
But it could also be an acronym for something.
I bet they're messing with us.
I think so, which is cool. I like bands that do that. Makes you want to figure out what they're really singing about.
Oh, yeah. Got to crack the code. And the way the album starts is amazing. It's like you're in a movie or something.
Yeah.
It opens with an air traffic controller trying to get in touch with a plane. And then this voice, like an embassy, sets the scene from behind a cabin door.
I love that. And then, bam, those multi-track vocals hit you along with those power chords. Pure Yachtles.
So good. So we've got this amazing opening and all these layers of sound and meaning. But what about the heart of it all? The lyrics. Like in I'm Over Sentimental, for example.
Yeah, I'm over sentimental. What's going on in that one?
It's got that beat that makes you want to dance.
For sure.
But the lyrics are hinting at something more complicated.
Interesting. I'm intrigued. It's like they're battling with themselves. You know, there's that energy in the music that's almost like they're trying to convince themselves.
Yeah, like they're saying, I'm over it, I'm over it.
Yeah.
But then you listen closer and there's that vulnerability in the lyrics. They still care.
Makes you wonder if anyone's ever really over being sentimental.
I know, right?
And the way they do that musically with the raw power chords mixed with those almost ethereal vocal harmonies, it's like that internal struggle is playing out in the music itself.
It's so cool how they do that.
It's that mix of raw and refined that makes them so different. Like they're drawing from that classic new wave sound, but they're also not afraid to experiment and add their own modern spin.
The Yachtles are pushing boundaries, but in a way that's familiar and that people can connect with.
Totally. It's like they're bridging the gap between different generations, bringing in those older new wave fans and giving the newer fans something fresh to latch onto.
I love that.
Yeah.
But there's more. I've also been humming It's Always Been You.
All instant classics.
They all just have that classic new wave energy, but with a modern edge.
Now, to really understand the Yachtles, you got to understand new wave. It was huge in the late 70s and early 80s. It was all about synthesizers and driving beats and...
Yeah, and the lyrics often had a bit of a darker edge to them compared to your average pop song.
Exactly.
And speaking of a darker edge, there's ghoulies in my attic.
Zombies in my garden, I got bats up in my roof, and Scooby-Doo's in my swimming pool, and Shaggy's on the
one's a lot of fun.
Oh, I know, right? The humor in that one really shows off their personality.
And that line about Phil Spector hanging out with Shaggy and Scooby-Doo. Come on.
Where else are you going to find that?
Nowhere. And musically, that track shows how well they blend different elements. It's got driving rock guitar, almost punk, but with these really pop vocal harmonies layered on top.
It's playful and it's self-aware, and it reminds me of some of those classic British comedy bands.
Like who?
Oh, like the Bonzo Dog Duda band, or Madness even.
Oh, yeah, of course.
The British wit.
Yeah.
They don't take themselves too seriously, and it just makes the music more fun.
It really does. And in a music world where everything feels so polished and perfect, they're not afraid to be a little goofy. I like that.
Me too. It's refreshing. Like, hey, let's not overthink this. Let's just have fun.
Right.
But even with all the humor, there's still some real depth to their music.
Definitely.
It's not just silly songs. They're tackling things like love and loss, identity, and, even the passage of time.
Yeah, they're dealing with the big stuff, but they do it in a way that's authentic and relatable. They're not trying to be all profound and preachy. They're just sharing their experiences.
Yeah, exactly. Through music. It makes me wonder what the stories are behind these songs. Like, what made Michael Kalik decide to make this album, this musical tribute to his uncle's band?
Well, it seems like it started out as something very personal. From what I've read, Michael was going through some hard times, and music was how he coped.
Makes sense.
He started playing around with some of his uncle's old demos and adding his own twist, and it kind of just went from there.
It's amazing how music can be so powerful like that. It can help you heal, And it's even more incredible that what started as this personal thing has turned into this amazing project that people all over the world are connecting with.
It really shows you what creativity can do. Sometimes the most powerful art comes from a place of vulnerability.
That's so true.
But to get the Yachtles, we really need to understand Yachts, the band that inspired them.
Yeah, definitely.
They were a huge deal in Liverpool, known for their live shows and for blending pop and punk.
Almost like a precursor to what the Yachtles are doing now.
Exactly.
But for Michael Kalik, this is more than just musical influence, right? It's a deeply personal connection.
Right. It makes you wonder if something that intense can appeal to a wider audience.
Yeah, will fans of the original Yachts see this as a genuine tribute? Or will they feel alienated?
That's the big question. It makes it even more interesting because former members of Yachts have apparently given this project their blessing.
That really says something. It's not just imitation, it's a real continuation of their legacy.
One thing that stood out to me in the sources was how involved some of the former Yachts guys were with making F.F.S. It said they had regular input on the songs. What do you think that was like?
Talk about taking a tribute to the next level. Can you imagine those conversations, those stories? Getting feedback from the guys who were actually there. Almost like they're passing the torch, don't you think?
I wonder if those guys, those former Yachts members, saw this as a chance to kind of revisit their own past, maybe even shape the sound of the Yachtles a little bit.
Definitely possible. But in all this fun stuff, there's a quote from a former Yachts member who's heard the album. He calls the songs sentiments. That one word says a lot, right?
Totally. There's something deeper here than just catchy tunes and retro vibes. The Yachtles are using music for something more to deal with emotions, pay tribute, maybe even explore some bigger themes.
It's fascinating, isn't it? We're seeing so many layers to this band. They're drawing from the past, but also making pop songs that could be hits, and maybe even touching on deeper emotions.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's definitely not something you see every day. This isn't just like, oh, they were influenced by them. It seems way deeper, almost like family.
Right. We've got Michael Kalik himself explaining it. He talks about being a Yachts fan since he was 9 years old. All those years led to this burst of creativity, he says. Spent 2021 and 2022 deep in Yachtle land, writing and recording. Sounds like F.F.S could stand for 40 years, a nod to those 4 decades of being inspired. What do you think?
Love that. For 40 years, that really captures how deep his love for yachts runs. This isn't just some phase for him, it's his whole life, coming out in music.
Totally. And makes me think about those reviews. One critic actually called F.F.S a greatest hits album, even though the Yachtles are a brand new band. How do they manage to sound so familiar, but also fresh?
It shows they can tap into that timeless sound, but still bring their own thing to it. It's not just copying, it's taking those classic new wave elements and making them work for today. And maybe it's that honesty, that real love for the music that speaks to both new fans and the old Yachts fans too.
Speaking of Yachts fans, one article mentioned that a bunch of the former members immediately gave the project their blessing. That must have been huge for the Yachtles getting that approval from their heroes.
Absolutely. It shows how much respect the Yachtles have for the band. They're not just taking the sound, they're having a conversation with the past.
Yeah.
Honoring the music, but moving it forward.
That's exciting. But let's bring our listeners back in for a second. What do you think is the biggest takeaway from everything we've learned about the Yachtles?
I think it's about how music connects generations, inspiring new artists, but also honoring those who came before. The Yachtles, they get that. They're not just about a sound, they're about capturing a whole era and making it relevant now.
So we've got this passionate frontman, a cool backstory, a killer debut album, and their musical heroes are on board. What's next for the Yachtles? Where do they go from here?
Picture this grainy film like Super 8 and all these late 70s places like the Whiskey A Go-Go, the Troubadour, all mixed with shots of the band playing. The energy is just incredible. Wow, they really went all in on the visuals too, huh? Not just the sound, but the whole look and feel of that era.
Yeah, it's like that tribute parody thing we talked about, taken to the next level. They're not just playing the music, they're living it.
It's like those movies Quentin Tarantino makes, you know? He's not just referencing old movies, he's recreating the whole vibe.
Exactly. And there's this really cool, kind of sad part in the video where they project a photo of Bob Bellis, Michael's uncle, the yacht drummer, onto a brick wall while they're playing. It's a small thing, but it adds so much emotion.
Wow, that's powerful. It really brings home the personal side of this project. It's a tribute, a celebration of their music and their own vision, all mixed together.
You got it. That's what makes the Yachtles so interesting. They're not just a band, they're telling a story with music, influences, and visuals. It's all connected.
And this is just the start for them. They have this amazing album, and people are talking about them. What do you think is next for the Yachtles?
I think they could really make it big. They've hit on something, that desire for a certain sound, a different time, but done in a modern way. They're not stuck in the past, they're bringing it forward.
And to you listening, as you check out the Yachtles, listen for those bits of yachts in their music, but also what makes them different. How do they mix their influences? What stories are they telling? What makes their sound unique?
It's like we've given you a map, and now it's up to you to explore. You've got the background, the insights, now go experience the Yachtles. See if you can find those layers, the hints of the past, and those flashes of something new.
It's 1977.
I definitely want to hear this album now.
Me too.
So there you have it, our deep dive into the Yachtles, their music, their story, their influences. We even got to peek into their visual world.
We hope this deep dive has given you everything you need to start your own journey with the Yachtles. Enjoy the music.
Keep exploring, keep listening, and keep the music playing.